We're back.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, guys. So, this is our third installment of the both of us doing the Bailey View. I did an individual one, so if you get a chance to check that out.
Oh, I'm going to hit you with something one of these days, but hopefully we'll just keep the conversation going and just deep dive into subjects that we think are worth communicating about.
Yeah. And today, what we're thinking we wanted to talk about was parenting in a mixed family. So, this is our beautiful family behind us. Sort of a Benetton ad, if you will. Hi, guys. Uh, and it came with a lot of challenges, which we're going to talk a little bit about. A lot of joy, but a lot of challenges. And we're a blended family too, right? So we've got my stepdaughter who's deaf. So it's deaf, which I'm just now learning sign language, ASL, which is amazing. It's been 13 years and I'm just now getting around to it. So I feel like I've been a terrible stepmother.
She shouldn't worry so much. I've been at it for 30 something years. Don't need to out Jennifer. And I'm not very good, but I tried. All right, so that's that. We finished with that for now.
Anyway, just to tell you that we come from a lot of different areas and we bring a lot to this conversation.
We do indeed, and this whole notion of how do you begin to parent a multi-ethnic, multicultural, we can use that language, I don't like multiracial child, is an important thing for people to consider as best they can before that love child pops up. You know, you want to be in the know because there are some challenges, and really and truly, they're mostly joys. But as in any parenting, you're going to have your highs and what do you say? There might be a few.
Challenges.
Oh, she just calls them challenges.
Challenges.
I'll call them lows,
Lows and
but
highs.
they will come to any family in any set of circumstances. But why don't we deep dive into some of the things that might be of on Lisa's mind or my mind about this and wow. Let me start this one because both of my parents come from multi-ethnic, multi-racial type situations. Mom's family from Jamaica, but Jamaica, you know, out of the many one, but it's an island with 80% or more of African peoples. But my family configuration in Jamaica is a complicated one with both primarily African descent people, but a fair amount, a good amount of European ancestry. And we keep hypothesizing that there's some Asian input, although the DNA trail has not shown that yet. But mom's got all of those mixed kind of situations, and my dad has the same thing going on in Louisiana. African people and Celtic people, Irish, English, Scottish people blending together for generations, I think. But I know most specifically my grandparents. So everybody's pretty much from a mixed situation, whether it was mixing by choice, right, which is what my grandparents chose to do, or it was mixing by the insidious institution of slavery, which forced African women to produce babies for white men, whatever white man wanted to have them, right? Slave owner, guest on the plantation, marauding bands of white men, just gonna snatch and take a woman. But there are all these people of African American descent who are light skinned, and many, if not most of them, I'm going to say this, I believe that mixing came without any agency or choice by the black females, right? So that's the situation. We already have inculcated in us that mixed DNA, and yet as soon as a black American, because I'm gonna stay in my cultural context, or a Jamaican American black person marries or couples up with a non-black person, here we go with a dialogue, right? Here we go with, well, what's going to happen to the children? and what's their going to be their life circumstances, and are they going to be X, Y, or Z, right? What are you going to call them? How shall they be defined? What's the hospital going to try to put on their birth certificate, right? Because
Right.
I lived that experience, and a hospital went to place white on two of my children's birth certificates, and
Easy.
back in those days, I'd still be the same way. I'm this African American, Jamaican man that was like, oh, hell no. Who gave you the right to do that? So
Right.
now,
It's crazy.
now, does it make a difference if your birth certificate says you're white and you're brown skin? Clearly, clearly, my sons didn't look like they were white. So what good would it have done them to have white on a birth certificate? So this is a complicated thing. It's got multiple layers. Every family has to discern for themselves what's appropriate. Like, where are we going with this? Where are we going to live? Where shall they go to school, right? What kind of religious institution can we go to? And so this
Yeah.
parenting things, even just the creation of a child in love, before you know it, you got some baggage you're carting with you. So what are you thinking, Lisa?
Yeah, well, couple of thoughts on that. So when I gave birth, my child, the one that I bring to our marriage, his dad is from Venezuela and actually was not on the birth certificate, although I did give him his last name. He was with me at the birth. It's kind of strange. I don't quite know why he didn't get on the birth certificate. That's very interesting, isn't it? that he's
Mm.
not on there. And yet his name is, my son has his last name, Fernandez. Um, anyway, that having said that, as a white mama who raised, at least a half Latino son, on my own, really, I was not given a lot of help by his dad. And I didn't meet Gordon until Darren was about 10. So for the first 10 years of our lives, we were really basically on our own. And I chose to do a lot of different things. Like we moved to Inwood. Okay. Initially we were in Jersey City and I had put him in an immersive language pre-K kindergarten, first grade. So he had English and Spanish that he was learning as he was learning his ABCs, as he was learning all this stuff. I think he could read before he went there because I taught him some things. Because he didn't have a lot of interaction with his father and the Spanish speaking set of us, he really just pushed back on the Spanish, which caused a problem for his schooling in the beginning. I ended up moving to Inwood at some point in Manhattan. And part of the reason I wanted to move to Inwood was, again, I wanted to be in a diverse community. I wanted to live in a community where not everybody looked like me. At least some of them were going to look like my son. And I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't do enough, I think, to bring his other ancestry in, right? Because he was raised by me and I was raised by white parents. So there's a lot that goes into that.
There's so much that goes into that, and even the cultural normative values that are in a community. So Inwood is a northern Manhattan neighborhood, but it's primarily Dominican influenced, right?
That's
So
right.
now a Spanish culture that's from the Caribbean and very different than Venezuelan culture in many ways, right? Very different than because all the many Latino or Latinx or Hispanic communities have their own history, their own narrative. The same thing can be said about the Pan-African community. And what was it for my dad to be a Louisiana guy marrying a woman of West Indian or Jamaican ancestry? It complicates things. But I think Lisa was on the right path, specifically speaking the language, trying to immerse Darian. And should we use our children's names? Anyway, that's out there. But
Probably not.
yeah, strike that one. Recant. You can't ever underestimate what sharing the cultural, linguistic values of a community with a small child, even if it's nothing more that when I see salsa music or hear salsa music playing, I can see my stepson kind of his body takes on the rhythm of the community. And the same,
True.
I dared to raise my children upstate New York in the middle of a white community, even though I knew better, because I had gone to high school and been the only black person in an upstate New York high school and had suffered horribly. But in my mind, I thought, we're a strong couple, my ex-wife and I, we're strong, we'll give the kids, we'll ground them in everything they need. And if anybody dares step to them, we're going to be prepared. But I was never prepared for my son to come home from the first day of a preschool program and say, guess what, Daddy? I said, what, son? He said, I'm a zebra. Oh, shit. The gloves was needing to go on. Who had the audacity to call my little beautiful boy a zebra? Now, you may have thoughts like that. You know, a man and a woman can have all kinds of thoughts. And you can think, oh, that little child must be of this or that heritage, although you can never be sure. But you may have a hypotheses, you may have some notion, but who in an educational setting would have the audacity to speak to a 3-year-old and tell them, oh, you're a zebra? So these questions about what language you're going to use, whose history are you going to go with, the standard American history that you're taught in the public school?
So, right. So I want to talk a little bit about that, just because the history that we learn, and I grew up in rural Montana. So my history that I learned was clearly insufficient. I felt completely illiterate in anything other than exactly what they wanted you to know, and who are they, the teachers, the culture that is seeped in white
State
supremacy,
sponsored.
state sponsored teaching, right? I mean, I went to public school. So and my father was a public administrator, a public school teacher, a coach. I come from a long line of educators, right? And so for me, I still didn't get. I learned how to critically think. Thankfully, thank goddess, I learned how to do that. But I wasn't given enough tools to to understand why I needed to be a critical thinker. Thankfully, moving to New York, and I put Darian in a school up in Inwood that was progressive. I wanted them to, and they cared more about his sort of heart and his soul as much about his heart and his soul as they did his academics. So that was important to me. And they talked a little bit more about culture. They talked about identity up there, and for me, I think that knowing our stories and understanding what that is, and starting it very early with our kids. I mean, Darian, our child, my son, has had multiple, he's always had a very diverse group of friends, always. And I am so grateful that I chose to raise him in that community, right? In the diversity of Jersey City, the diversity of an Inwood, the diversity of a Washington Heights. I mean, I'd like to jump up a little bit for when,
Choosing to live in a particular place is it's a radically important thing when you're going to raise a multicultural family up, because who wants their children to come home with long faces? Who wants to deal with the children who have been told, oh, I remember my mother said her sister came home from school and they told her that the children in the classroom said, oh, we used to own your people as slaves. To have white children tell a black child that in a classroom. And then my grandfather, he went to the school the next day, and instead of fixing the situation, he said, well, our people own slaves and you don't have to worry about that. As if owning slaves could ever be seen or viewed as a positive thing. The only thing that I can think of is, oh my God, we're from horrible people. So these stories, the narratives that we tell, it's so radically important to move to safe communities. And if you can't be in safe communities, then you've got your work cut out for you, because you've got to deal with the language differentiation. And that could be Spanish, French, or any of the other languages, Igbo or Fulani. It could be any language that's different, but it could just be in the normative ways you speak. So like sometimes go like, oh, why do you talk white, or why do you have to be so particular in your language usage? And my siblings would tell you, I'm not that person. I'm the kid that left the Bronx and came into Washington Heights. I call it Upper Harlem, and I started using the vernacular of the streets because that's who I was living with. I was trying to jive, get down, hang out with the peeps in the hood, and I wanted to be like them. So I had to somehow code switch when I came back in the house because my parents would be like, "What was that? What did you say?" But giving your children a sense of the totality of the linguistic possibilities.
Yeah.
Because, right, standard English versus colloquial,
Colloquial. Colloquial.
versus Ebonics versus Spanglish versus Spanish versus Igbo versus Fulani. Where are you going, and how do you immerse your child into all of that and give them the beauty that exists within all the possibilities of language? What about your history? Don't go with what's in the textbook. Oh, please get yourself up to date on what the real histories are, both of the Americas and of the world. World history is vitally important to this American situation that we're in. We don't exist, at least the historical bits of information that we have about North America prior to European conquest or
Colonialism.
colonialism is we don't have the fullest of picture, although we do have we have some of the information, oral tradition.
Well, and having said that, as you're talking, I'm thinking we should probably do a land acknowledgement every time we do one of these shows, right? So, talking about knowing our history, and we currently are residing where the Southern Paiute resided and continue to reside. There's some businesses here that are owned by the Southern Paiute, so it's a rich tribal tradition that continues to this day. And also, I want to jump forward a little bit to what Gordon's talking about. It is difficult when you live in an area that is not quote unquote diverse or welcoming, sort of, to this beautiful picture behind us. And yet, even when you do live there, I'm going to fast forward to when my eldest stepson, Gordon's middle child, went up to
Ithaca, New York.
no, I'm going to go even earlier.
Oh, when he went to
It
the
went to the
Catholic
Catholic
school.
school,
Ooh, what an experience.
and they were not kind. So he wasn't black enough for that.
You know, it's a strange thing in this American experiment we're living. Once upon a time, the one drop rule was the law of the land. And if you had a child born to an African woman, automatically that child was a slave. That was kind of like codified in the laws of the colonies and in the states.
Does everybody know what the one drop rule was?
So that one drop of African blood, if you've got 100 drops of blood and one drop of the blood is African, you could be a slave. You probably were a slave.
Yeah.
There were so many slaves that were light skinned with light eyes and straight hair, what we call European hair. It's not European hair. There are Asians that have hair like that. Heck, there are black people that have hair like that. But just going along with what they say. So the one drop rule. But these ideas about your racial makeup, as if this thing was a precise science, that Europeans were the keepers of the precise science on racial ideals or concepts or the science construction. Well, yeah, they do construct a false premise
It's false.
of race. Because as far as I know, and I'm gonna keep beating that horse. Oh, I don't want to beat the horse. Let me pet.
No,
let me pet
not
the
the
horse. Let me pet the
Don't beat
horse.
it.
I'm gonna pet the pony. Pet the pony. I'm gonna pet this pony and say there should have never been any differentiation between the human family, save your cultural, spiritual, religious, political, all those things that we construct within the given confines of our societies.
So what do we do? So back to the parenting aspect of it, right? So what do you do with that BIPOC child, right? Black, indigenous, person of color, any one of those identities. All of our family, except for me, actually identifies as that, right? So if any one of these children comes home from school with any of that upset about being called, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, you're to this, you speak white, you speak da 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 da, how do we navigate that, and how do we, I mean, it's not easy, because it can pit against also the person, and in this case I'm the white mama, right? I'm the mother that looks differently. I'm the mom that doesn't identify as BIPOC. I'm the mom that may not necessarily um, be able to talk on that, and yet I might be the person that is there. So what do I say? How do I bring,
But
right? What do I bring?
in that mixed situation, if you have a European American as a partner or a parent, it's almost imperative that you be the
That's
one
right.
that speaks to it, because of course the expectation is like the black or the Latinx or the native person or the Asian person is going to be the most vocal about it, but maybe that's not what ultimately wins the day. I heard a story the other day. I said this to Lisa earlier. There was a story that I heard on, I think it may have been on NPR, but I am a bit of an NPR nerd. Don't hate me because of that.
Really is.
I like Pacifica too, so only radio listeners know what these things are. But anyway, the story was about a mother of color, I believe an African American mother, who went to the school 3 times because the child wasn't getting what they needed. It wasn't until the white father went in and spoke to the school that they changed things. And so sometimes, given the realities of the situations that we find ourselves in, because how many of us can find a school that's got a mixed leadership team and has specifically in its mission statement the dismantling of the historical,
Oppression.
oppressions that have dominated and infected the American system, right? I mean, I maybe the UN school. I think
Maybe,
I wanted to
maybe
get my kids in the UN school, but that's not
the
easy to figure
Friends. I
out.
don't
Or
know.
or the Friends,
Friends.
but
Sidley Friends.
are Quakers 100% in? I don't know. I've never been
I
Quaker.
don't
I
think
like
so.
Quakers. I don't want to in any way disparage Quakers, but unless you've got a school that was created by
Right.
people across the spectrum of the human family who intentionally want to dismantle the oppressive practices of the dominant culture that's laid its pause, its unkind and unpleasant pause on the entirety of the society. How are you going to raise your children safely? How are you going to emphasize all the cultures that they come from? How are you going to talk about race
Yeah.
and racism within the American system without having a child that's distraught? Like, you don't want to scare your little ones, but you've got to be able to talk to them about the difference of the human family and that everybody isn't kind. Everybody isn't kind.
Well, so a couple of things that, as you're talking, made me think of it. So you're right. It has the Northern European, the European American parent. It's imperative that they are involved in this stuff. First of all, if you have children that look like ours behind us, it is imperative that you not only get involved, but you educate, you dismantle your own, because you do not want to bring any of that in to your babies at all, right? I mean, it is just, and we've seen it happen. I've seen people that have given their children complexes or something. There's a fetishism that goes with it, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be negative attention, but the positive attention is very fetishistic. Fetishistic? Am I
Fetishized?
fetishized?
I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
I just made up a word. Anyways,
Hey,
but
she got it
making up
going.
words. But the thing I was going to say is things like two things. One, when I rode a school bus with my son, and people would, his mom, you're his mom, and they laughed. These little girls were giggling because I clearly, how could I be this kid's mom, right? So that was the first sort of inkling that I needed, that and I don't know why it surprised me. I was like, yeah, of course, but to them it didn't make sense. So I thought that was interesting, but that's an important thing to do too. So if you are the Northern European or the European American part of this couple and your children look like that, show up at school, say this is my child too, right? So that they don't just get a different sense. But the other thing is also get involved
Get
when
it?
Trayvon Martin.
No, but well,
Yeah,
yes, go to protests
yeah,
or go to rallies in support of.
yeah,
But even more than that, when it's Black History Month, show up with your white self or your Asian self,
that's
your
right,
native self. Show up for Black History Month if your child's
that's
mixed
right.
with an African or African American or Jamaican family. Like we have to bring all of our cultures to bear and support them in their best state to inculcate in those children the reality that you come from love and the love that created you. They are valuable pieces to people across the planet. No matter who you are, where you're from, there are positive things for us to teach our children about our
Very much
history
so.
and our ancestry. And so giving them that even before they get to school, they ought to know who they are and where they come from, right? But every family doesn't have the time or the energies to do it. But I'm going to suggest that you make it a really important thing. Mark your cultural calendar. Demonstrate the importance of the way you and your people do things. Like for me, holidays mean gumbo or jambalaya, right? It means fruitcake and whatever the other good things that come. I like curry. My Jamaican curry is good and I love it. But whatever it is, if it's your Ray and nephew, some sorrel with some Ray and nephew, then have it. Or if it's some eggnog with some moonshine in it, then have it. If it's some coquito, but tell the children, raise the children, give them all the goodness that your
That's
historical
right.
sense of who you are. Make sure
And,
they have it.
and you have to do that with both, right? With
Oh,
both cultures. I mean, I celebrate the solstice, and I have tried to get people involved in the solstice. I also, and make sure and we're about done with
yeah,
this
for this
segment. We
one.
don't want to go too long because we could talk about this for hours. Raising our children is super, super important. Gordon's talking a little bit about, about showing up, and just showing up as, a couple that's strong, showing up as, give your children the freedom to adapt to a culture as they have multiple cultures in them. They don't
Ad-
just have one.
Adapting to the new reality
Yeah.
that you've created, that precious life
Yeah.
you brought forth has a different amount of DNA from both parties, and you're going to see them blossom into a new creation. Still, I'm still defining the Americas as the new land. In
Yeah.
that, I don't believe ever before the combinations of humanity that are blended here, made here, created
I don't
in
think
the
so either.
Americas. I
Yeah.
think we've made a new people in so many ways, and the beauty of it is just breathtaking.
Well, and making sure they have the tools to create that, right? The
To live
confidence
that.
to live that, the confidence to speak about it, and that's why you need to speak to them about racism, use opportunities, and don't shy away from it. I mean, people who try and avoid that, your kids aren't ready. Your kids aren't prepared, right? When they go out into the real world, they don't know what's going on if you're not sharing. You're trying to create some sort of safety zone for them. And I understand that, but that's not safe
It,
because it doesn't give them the tools with which to manage all that will come at them out there. They're going to have to deal with it one way or the other.
one way or another,
Yeah.
the differences that exist in our physicality, in our cultural understandings, in the political or apolitical families that we come from. Everything comes to bear in our children's lives. Everything we share with them, whether we speak it or it's just the way we behave around these things. So do the very best you can. Love them with every ounce of energy that you can give them, and teach them, show them, guide them, and get them to all the cultural museums and offerings that a community can give them, because the more they know, the better they are.
The more you know. And honestly, living by example is the best way.
Yeah.
So, mwah.
Bye, folks. Thanks for
See
joining
y'all.
us. See you next time.
And please subscribe and leave us comments. Okay, bye.
Ooh.